Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing a report tabled last month in the House of Commons from a special joint parliamentary committee of MPs and senators charged with reviewing the current MAiD regime, which recommended, among other things, that Canada expand assisted dying laws to allow people with illnesses such as dementia to make advance requests. It's something a majority of Canadians support. For example, over 80% of CART members support the concept of being able to predetermine the conditions under which they would choose assisted death. So why is it so complicated? David, I'll begin with you on this one, and I'll just start by saying, even if someone is perfectly happy in their dementia state, how much should it matter that their former self would have loathed the idea of them ending up in a long-term care home, needing help with daily activities?
Well, you've touched on the problem. And what our members are concerned with is that this topic coexists with the meltdown of our healthcare system and the failure to provide treatment along the way. So did I arrive at this position where I'm knowingly consenting to MAiD, no problem, nobody's, unfairly influencing me, but gosh, if I'd had better treatment, I didn't have to wait so long for therapy or for surgery or for treatment, if I was able to get the latest new drugs within, we have to wait 3 years in Canada versus 6 months in Finland. If I could get better treatment along the way, maybe I wouldn't be in this position. That topic, I'm afraid, is starting to spill over a little bit into the MAiD discussion.
Dr. Simpson, David raises an interesting point around motives, this sort of fear of a painful life versus fear of a painful death. How much should that matter in these conversations?
I think, and David referenced it too, I think we're, from an ethical analysis from medicine, MAiD emerged out of end-of-life care ethics. Fundamental ethical principles in medicine are preservation of life and relief of suffering. When there is little life left to live, then relief of suffering becomes the profound and overriding ethical duty. And I think much of the medical profession and most of the public feel that that is ethically appropriate. Where, as David referenced, the further we move away from that, the more and more ethically murky and complicated it becomes, to a stage where now we've got non-terminal disorders where there is much life left to preserve. There may well be much suffering, but there's much life left to preserve. And then what is it that we should be doing to help preserve that as a good life? And it's about good healthcare, it's about good social support, it's about the availability of those things that make living with chronic health conditions dignified, reasonable, and appropriate. And when we start devaluing life in that circumstance, that's when we start to get into increasingly murky waters.
And it's important to remember that what we think we will want in health, when we write that today, will not be what we may want when we have a limiting disability. I used to be a long-distance cyclist and a sailor and a fifth-level martial artist. Every time I lost something, it was a loss. But we learn along the way to compensate. We mourn the death of what we wore, and we look for the best if we have the correct help for what can be. And advanced directives made in health will not mirror necessarily what we want or what we can get when we are in another state.
Ron, have you ever considered the possibility that you could change your mind?
Yes, I could. But you gotta remember, the key feature of dementia is the loss of my mind. And you've got to understand that. It means the loss of my mind. I can no longer function cognitively or rationally. What do I feel? I don't know what I'm going to feel. I do know this. With some dementia people, they reach the point, you hand them their teddy bear, they can stroke their teddy bear night and day, and they're happy and content. Should they get MAiD? They're not in a position to ask, are they?
What if they ask it in advance? And I'll put this one to Helen, though, because nothing is black and white, Ron. Nothing is black and white. What about the little old lady sitting in a chair, perfectly content, happily knitting?
Yeah, I mean, I think You know, I think Sandy's touched on this. There will be some ethical dilemmas. I know there are clinicians who are talking now about how they'll struggle in situations like that and what will an advance request get there. But I think one thing we haven't really talked about yet is at the end of the day, this is about individual choice. It's about suffering that's intolerable to the individual. And it's about compassion for that person. So I think we need to cycle back to that and think about if Ron chooses, if this is what Ron chooses, and this is how Ron wants his life to end, that's Ron's choice. And if he makes the decision while he has capacity and consents while he has capacity, it's his right to do that. I think it's important too, Marissa, to note that the current law does state that if there are any signs of resistance, whether physical or verbal, that the process does not go ahead, even today, for someone who has, for example, a terminal illness. So there is a safeguard in there in that instance of resistance.
All right, we need to take a quick break. Up next, I speak with a former member of the Dutch Euthanasia Review Committee about what Canadians should understand about the law in the Netherlands, the first country in the world to legalize euthanasia. That's next.